Hi there, and welcome to the Surviving Trauma Stories of Hope podcast. I'm excited to welcome my incredible guest, Laura Spaulding, to the podcast this week. Laura is the founder and CEO of Spaulding Decon, and she is a former law enforcement officer who has evolved her business from a solo operation to a nationwide franchise specializing in crime scene, hoarding, and meth-lab cleanup in the United States. As a result, Spaulding Decon topped Entrepreneur Franchise 500 crime scene cleanup category in 2022. In this episode, Laura shares her journey from humble beginnings as a woman-led startup. And today, Spaulding Decon is scaling rapidly with 20 to 30 new franchises a year and has recently added real estate acquisitions to its business model and has millions of followers on social media. Laura's path to success would have defeated many. However, she did not allow her obstacles to set her back in life. Instead, she transmuted her traumatic experiences and built a successful life for herself and others. In this podcast conversation, we talk about her career in law enforcement that led her to start a business specializing in crime scene cleanup, the rapid expansion of Spaulding Decon as a franchise across the United States, real estate, lessons learned in business, and facing bigotry and discrimination. It was an honor to have the opportunity to learn from someone with tenacity, grit, determination, and business savvy. I know you will love this episode because it stays true to the theme of the podcast, in that Laura has certainly transformed her challenges and obstacles in life into something positive, but at the same time, it inspires us and teaches us phenomenal lessons on how to start a business, and even giving us in this episode the opportunity to participate in a franchise if that is something that you're interested in. Head over to her website, www.crimescenecleaning.com. Thank you to my listeners for joining me on this journey. Comment on the posts on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn, and let me know what you think of this episode. Also, head over to Amazon and take a lot and get your copy of my book, Ray of Light. And please leave me a rating and review. It definitely means the world to me. As always, stay tuned and keep listening. Hi, Laura. Welcome to the Surviving Trauma Stories of Hope podcast. How are you?
I'm great, Marlene. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. It's so awesome. I'm so glad you could join me. So today we're going to talk about an amazing story. I love your story of success in life. Oh my gosh, you're such an inspiration. But let's start with your backstory, because I always believe that a backstory is important, when we are sharing our hope and we share our success. So your story starts at the age of 19 years old when you went to the military and you spent your time in the military, but sadly had to leave at some point. Tell us about what that experience was like and the reason why you had to leave.
Yeah, for sure. So I went in the military because I thought I had no other choice. So it was 1994 and I had just finished my community college of 2 years, and I had no money or support to be able to go on to the university afterwards to get my bachelor's degree. So I thought that the only way I was going to be able to get my education and finish it was if I gave my service to the military, and in return, they would give me the GI Bill or some form of education in that way. Yeah. So I enlisted in 1994, and it was 1 year after Bill Clinton passed the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. And, I was only 19, so I was, pretty naive about everything to begin with.
So the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, sorry to interrupt you, Laura, what does that mean?
Oh, yeah. So back in 1993, the military was discharging gay people for no other reason than because they're gay. And in order to kind of make peace with, I think, both sides, President at the time, Bill Clinton, passed the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. What that means is that if you're gay, you can serve as long as you don't tell anyone you're gay, you don't do anything that would,
Right.
have a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, or you don't get into a marriage. So essentially, shut your mouth and don't be who you are. That was the essential part there. But I've always looked at the military in two different ways, and that is people go in because they have nowhere else to go or they're going nowhere in life. And I had nowhere to go. So it was kind of a perfect fit for me. I had nowhere to live. I had no job, nothing to do. So I thought, okay, this would be my savior, so to speak. So about 3 or 4 months into it, I was in the barracks with about 30 other women, and we had just finished boot camp, and it was right before our individual training. And they started calling women one at a time down to the XO's office, which is like the higher level ranking person on the base. And it started at like 9 or 10 p.m. and it went till like, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And we were all like, just, very young, impressionable, and intimidated by this. And when it was my turn, which was at the latter part of the evening, he pulled me in and asked me my opinion on who I thought was gay, and wanting me to make bets if I had to bet who was gay, and it immediately became clear to me that he was running a witch hunt, and he was avoiding the law because he wasn't asking me personally. He was asking me about everyone else. So that's how he was circumventing the law. And at the end of the day, or, several months, we were charged. There was 3 of us charged with homosexuality, and they were going to put us on trial. And we stood to go to prison for 5 years based on someone's opinion of us that we were gay. So, after I thought about it, at first I was pretty defiant with it, and I wanted to fight it because I knew it was wrong and it was an injustice. But then I also knew that I had a military appointed attorney. So it wasn't like an ally. It was definitely not an ally. So I knew the odds were stacked against me. And at the end of the day, do you really want to be in a military who's going to treat you like a second-class citizen? And so I elected to get out, and they stamped my paperwork homosexual, which prevented me from getting jobs moving forward. So it's like the scarlet letter when you're carrying your papers around. So it was a life-changing experience, to say the least.
I can imagine. Because how do you now own your truth after that experience? So after you left the military, you went on to join the police force. With this discharge papers, how did you manage to get in? And tell us what that experience was like as a police officer.
So I didn't realize that they were going to stamp my paperwork like that. Again, I was 19 years old. I had no idea until I was literally sitting on the plane on a one-way ticket out of there. And I opened up my files and I saw it. And I thought, oh my God, this is the scarlet letter. So once I landed, I called my military appointed attorney and I said, how am I ever supposed to get a job with this label stamped on me everywhere? And he said, don't tell people that you were in the military. They will never know. And so I listened to him, and that's how I got hired.
Okay. Something like that leaves a scar on your personal life. And what was that journey like for you to overcome and live who you are as a gay woman?
Well, I was persecuted by my own family before I ever got into the military. So it wasn't really new to me. Unfortunately, it was something that I had been living with for many, many years, the bigotry, the discrimination, and I was used to it. And I could tell based on the way that the high-ranking people in the military were acting, they were angry that Bill Clinton had passed this law, and they were doing whatever they could to circumvent the law and still get everybody out. Mm-hmm. So even today, I think there's about 1,000, I think the last statistic I heard, maybe 1,000 people a year that were getting discharged at the time.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if I can just go back, you're saying this was also something that happened in your family. This was how you were branded in the military. What did you do to really live an open life with your partner now? What was that journey like for you?
Well, I've noticed that I'm in my late 40s, and the way that I live is very, very different than gay people in their 20s because they haven't had the experiences that I have. So we're still very, very careful because I don't know any different. I'm always on guard. I'm always protective of my privacy for that reason. And I don't think that will ever go away. It's because that is the era that I grew up in. And the amount of discrimination that I faced is more than any other gay person that I know personally. So like when we share our experiences, most people have never been through, half of what I have. And I'm grateful for that. So that means hopefully that times are changing and the world is evolving, but I still can't shake that. That's my truth, my story, and that's why I live so protectively.
Mm-hmm. I read an article somewhere you faced discrimination most of your life, like you mentioned, in your family, within your work situations, but not only what we've discussed now, but also just being a female in a male-dominated world. So again, joining the police department, what was that experience like? And from what I know, you worked undercover. Did you have to face more of this type of discrimination within the police department?
Yeah, I've always been in male-dominated careers, and I think it's probably because I'm always trying to prove a point. And women made up, at the time, I think it was 25% of the entire police department. It wasn't much, but there's stigmas associated with female officers, and they're not very good. So, I was always trying to prove myself, sometimes to my own detriment in a way. And a good example is going undercover. That was something that I did not because I wanted to, but because I felt like I needed to move up in my career. It was something that was thankless, very low paying, and very, very dangerous. So there was really no benefit to it other than a potential career advancement.
Mm-hmm. So you worked, if I understand correctly, you worked in street prostitution undercover as well as in street narcotics.
Correct.
Now, this obviously gave you like a very different perspective on life, because when we grow up within our society, in our neighborhoods, we know a certain way of life. But working as an undercover officer, you get to see the other side of how people live, because you have to become this persona in order to work undercover. So how would you say that experience led and informed the work that you do in your business today?
It changed me as a person. I became very jaded, very negative, very untrusting. You see the worst of the worst in the world every single day. So without a break. So it's very hard to find balance when you're constantly seeing babies in crack houses with maggots in their diapers, women selling their bodies or their kids for drugs. There's a horrible side to the world that most people will never, ever see. And honestly, I wish I hadn't, because it changed me for the worst. And it took me a good 5 years after I left law enforcement to get back to reality.
Mm-hmm. And so what were some of the tools that you used? Did you go to therapy, or how did you process all of that? Because it's quite a difficult experience, right? A traumatic experience to have to see that day after day and become part of that. What tools did you use to work through those emotions after that traumatic experience?
I didn't. And it cost me relationships, friendships, because it makes you immediately distrustful of anyone and everyone. I was very low paid when I was undercover. I think I was making $39,000 a year. I was living paycheck to paycheck. And it was just one of those things that I look back on. And I think the worst thing that could have happened to me would have been being stuck there and being stuck in that cycle. And I think these things happen for you, not to you. And my realization was that this is not a long-term gain or benefit for me, that this is actually detrimental. And it probably made my prior trauma even worse, because of seeing all that every day. It just almost reinforced it, that the world is a bad, evil place.
Mm-hmm. But you made the decision to leave that behind. So can I ask, so what led to what you do now? What was there sort of a defining moment when you decided, hang on, there is another way that I can use this experience in a positive way?
Well, I wish it was that well thought out. It wasn't. So when I left undercover, it was because I got a new supervisor in that unit and he was a bigot. He's very prejudiced. And so I left and went to another department. And going to that department, I had that realization that I cannot do this for the rest of my life, nor do I want to. I was miserable in my job. I was miserable where I lived. I didn't like living in the Midwest. And I knew I had to do something to get out. And that's kind of when I started the therapy. And I was on this mission to try to figure out what I wanted to do. And I knew I wanted to start a business. I just didn't know what business because I had no money. So franchises were out of the picture because I had no money. I had $2,500 saved into my name and I was living paycheck to paycheck. I had a roommate. So my options were very, very slim. And it was one day that I was working a homicide where a woman asked if we were going to come back and clean it up, where I had that light bulb moment. And I thought, we don't do that, but I don't know who does. And I started fact finding, trying to figure out, well, who's cleaning up this stuff? And embarrassingly, I had never even thought about it. I was so focused on my job that I didn't even think about what happened afterwards. So after a lot of research, I realized there's a niche here and it's not being met. And that's when I said, well, can I start this with very little to no money? And can I do the work alone? And that's how it started.
Okay.
But it started as a side hustle too. And I asked approval from my department and I initially got it. And then they tried to retract it and gave me an ultimatum: quit my job or quit my business. So I chose to quit my job.
Okay. So the business that you are in is that you clean up crime scenes and you clean up meth labs and even hoarded homes. So let's start with the meth lab and then the crime scenes, because that links back to you being a police officer. That's the closest that you were. Mm-hmm. So how did you start the business sort of on your own? I mean, clearly you were connected to the survivors of the victims. Mm-hmm. So you were right there to say, okay, well, I can do that. But how did you start? Did you do all the work on your own when you started?
I did. Yeah. So the way I started, it was a side hustle. And I was essentially kind of wanting to be the resource to help these people. And I would clean it up when I was off duty. And, it was very difficult to start this business because it's not a business where you can advertise in the same manners, because no one wants to talk about death or clean up after a traumatic incident. So, it was something where I did all the marketing on the ground. I went apartment to apartment, hotels. I just went, on my days off because this was going to be my survival. I knew that I was going to leave the police department. I just didn't realize that I would be given that ultimatum that quickly. Mm-hmm. And it was a control thing. That was the reason why they gave me the ultimatum. No other reason than control.
Yeah. So you basically started the business, did all the marketing yourself by going to various locations, hotels, apartment blocks, talking to the supervisors and saying, this is my business card. If something happens in here and you need a cleanup from either a suicide or any other homicide, then please call me.
Yes.
So with the little savings that you had, how did you manage to get all the equipment and things that you needed in order to do the cleanup? Because, you get the marketing down and now you get that call. How did that work?
Yeah, that was another incident of that pushed me again. So what I did was I started just Google searching for someone to train me on how to do this. So I found a guy in Dallas, Texas. I was in Kansas City at the time. And I called him up and I said, hey, I want to learn how to do this. And he said, for $2,500, I will teach you. And that was literally all I had in my account. And I said, well, I've got to take a chance. So I gave him the $2,500. I flew to Dallas. I used my only week of vacation. And when I was there at training, I knew this was for me. Like, it didn't bother me. I had been exposed to it. Mm-hmm. But what he didn't do was train me on anything business related. It was all how to do this, how to do that. But it wasn't like, how do you market? How do you sell? How do you bid? How do you estimate? Nothing like that. So there was still a big deficiency there. But in that class, I met another guy who went to his bank and got a $150,000 SBA loan. And he told me how to do it. He even gave me his business plan to use. So I literally just changed the name on the business plan, went home back from training and walked into the bank and said, I need a business loan. Here's my business plan. And they basically laughed at me and they wouldn't give me any money. So I went to another bank and then another bank. So I went to 4 separate banks and they all said no. So I called my friend back and I said, what's going on here? And he was like, I don't understand this. This is literally what we did. And then the light bulb went in and I thought, I understand it. It's because you're a male and I'm a female. That's why you got the loan and I didn't. So then I thought, okay, how can I get this money?
Yeah.
And I walked into the 5th bank and I said, I need a home equity loan for windows. How much can you give me? And she said, I can give you 15,000. I said, perfect, I'll take it. It was 10% of what he got, but I had to make it work. So that is how I bought the basic equipment, the basic chemicals, the consumables, and I started doing all the jobs by myself.
At this point, you're no longer in the police force because you used to get leads. So now where did your leads come from, now that you were no longer serving?
Well, I started and it lasted about 3 months when the police department gave me the ultimatum. So when they gave me the ultimatum and I quit, I didn't like living in the Midwest. I hated living there. So I thought, why am I going to stay here? So I literally packed my stuff up and moved to Florida, which is where I'm from. And I thought, it's a better population, better place to live. And I didn't lose much traction with my business in Kansas City because I had only been open for like 3 months. So I moved everything to Florida and that's where everything kind of blew up.
So, Florida is where a lot of people go to retire from what I know about Florida. But,
Yes.
how many, if you look at a market for the type of work that you do, how big is that market? And still, how did you manage to get into that market?
Well, it's an excellent market because it is a retirement community. So, we say everybody comes to Florida to die, essentially. But, you have other states like Arizona and Texas that people go to as well that are great retirement communities. So I knew that there was a big market there. I just had to break into it. So, when I came to Florida, I started the same way that I did in Kansas City, boots on the ground, door to door, working by myself.
Mm-hmm. So I know that you built this business into a franchise. So do you want to skip ahead and sort of explain to me and the listeners how you went from doing all of the work yourself to actually building this into something that was a model that you could then leverage as a franchise and sell?
Yeah, so I started my company in 2005, but I didn't actually franchise until 2016. So I had a decade of experience learning the good, the bad, the ugly, what works, what doesn't, developing systems. And honestly, that is why I decided to franchise. I thought, okay, so we can replicate this system and hopefully I can give this opportunity to people that were in the same spot that I was, they need a break. They need a chance. They're motivated. They want to succeed. They just need someone to show them the way. And that was my whole reason for franchising.
Okay. So when you actually decide to franchise, do you sort of target specific franchisees like ex-military or also ex-police,
Yeah, we do. We try to target military people are excellent. But I also like to target women because women are very underrepresented in franchising and in business in this country. And I want to give opportunities to women to get into business and then hopefully mentor them to be successful. Mm-hmm. That's one thing that I never had was a mentor in business, and I suffered because of it. So I want to be able to provide that for our female franchisees.
Yeah. When you are a franchisee, you buy a ready-made
Business in a box.
business. You buy that, right? You buy the branding of the business. It's proven, it works. You have an instruction. I'm thinking of restaurants.
Yes.
I come from a restaurant background, and there are certain standards
Yeah.
had to adhere to. We would get rated. So tell us, how does that work for your franchisees? What do they get, and sort of what does the payment and the fee structure look like when you become a franchisee?
Yeah. So in terms of franchising, we're service-based as opposed to product-based. So what we provide you is a territory of 500,000 people. So if you live in, Los Angeles, California, 500,000 people is probably, 10% of the whole population. So you would own that protected territory. So anything that comes in that market is yours. It gives you we give you the marketing templates. We teach you how to sell. We teach you how to estimate. We provide the chemicals, the equipment, the software, the uniforms, everything that you need. And then we do ongoing training. You're issued kind of a coach to help you with training. And a lot of people struggle with the sales side of it. So what we've done is we've created a sales program to help people that maybe come from a background where they didn't have to do that. And it helps them talk to people. You'd be surprised how many people just aren't comfortable talking to people, and providing them solutions and offering them our help.
So now that you've built this very successful business throughout the United States, what is your role now?
So now I'm fortunate to have fantastic staff that help me build what it is today. We have about 50 locations across the country. And our plan is to go international at some point. So what I do now is I am basically the innovator. I come up with new ideas in technology, maybe new services that we could provide to enhance our franchisees' portfolio, essentially. So like in 2016, I added real estate onto our business model. So now I teach them how to buy, fix and flip, and sell real estate to make profits off of that, because we have, kind of a niche in finding these distressed sellers. So I work a lot on the innovation, and then I work a lot on the real estate side.
Okay, that's awesome. Now, I want to talk a bit about your YouTube channel. I looked at the social media, and you have millions of followers on TikTok, 1 million on YouTube. I think just over 500,000 on Instagram. How does that, the platform and the content that you share there, serve the community?
So when I decided to do this, it was in 2019. So it wasn't that long ago. And I was getting contacted by a lot of reality TV show companies. And they wanted to make a reality show with our company showing what we do on a day-to-day basis. So we met with a lot of people, and it just seemed like they had big ideas, but then they never really implemented anything, and it never went anywhere. So in 2019, I decided to take it into my own hands and make our own show, because YouTube had provided us with that platform. And I remember from 2005, my biggest hurdle in selling this service was that no one knew it existed. Everybody that I talked to said, "Oh, I thought the police did it," or I never thought about it, or whatever. So I had a really big hurdle to overcome. So I saw YouTube as a platform where I could educate my consumers into letting them know help is there. You don't have to do it, and no, the police don't do it. So we turned this into kind of an educational thing where we follow myself and, the technicians around on a day-to-day basis. And you get to know, who are these people that actually do this cleanup? What makes them motivated to do this every single day? And then we teach you essentially how to do it and why we're doing it, because this is a natural occurrence that happens every single day in this world. And thankfully, we accomplished our goal of awareness, because we get so many messages now like, "Oh my God, I had no idea somebody did this. Now I know." And we get a substantial amount of jobs from social media.
That's fantastic. And I like the educational aspect that you also couple with the marketing, because what you don't know, you can't act on.
Right.
Is there one piece of advice, if you look back from 2005 till now, that you learned in setting up this business? Because obviously your franchisees, they are getting a model that's been tested and proven and it works, right? But is there one lesson where you would say, very expensive lesson, I will never, ever do that again. I won't make that a mistake again.
Oh, there's been a lot of expensive lessons. Choosing employees and franchisees that were not good fits for our brand. That was probably the most expensive lesson that I learned. Choosing improperly is an expensive mistake.
Mm-hmm. Because it's not only the finance, but I would imagine that in employees and franchisees, you invest a lot of time in them in order to make it a success, the employees and the franchisees. And then, of course, ending that with the termination is always, it's the time lost, the money lost, the effort lost, and you have to kind of start that again.
Yeah, they're representing your brand too. So if they're a poor representation, that looks poorly upon all of us.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I wanted to talk to you about your book. You were writing your book and it's very exciting. So What is your book about?
I think a lot of people are going to be very surprised when they read this book because I am very private and I don't talk a lot about, the traumatic events that happened for many, many years. So I lay it all out in this book, and including the mistakes that I've made, what I've learned from it, and essentially how I got to food stamps to where I am now. So it's really kind of a path, I hope, for other women that are in a really bad position and maybe they don't see hope. I'm hoping that they can maybe find a little hope out of my book.
That's fantastic. I mean, we can all learn from it. I'm of course here soaking all of this up. And when can we expect your book? When will your book be out?
I'm hoping by the end of this year, if not the very first quarter of next year.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I have a morbid fascination with this, Laura. So I have to ask, I'm sure the listeners have too. Do you have any interesting cleanup stories? I personally did not have the guts to go through all of the videos. I watched some of the ones on LinkedIn. But do you have any interesting cleanup stories to share with us?
They're all interesting to me because they're all very, very different. There are, a lot of them are very, very sad. People with terminal illnesses that choose just to end their life and not live that way. And, it really makes you think in this country, we give that dignity to our animals so they don't suffer, but we don't give it to our people. And I've never understood that, why we would allow our people to suffer when they don't have to. So those are always very, very sad for me. More not sad for the death. It's sad because they had to wait for the death.
I suppose with the cleanups, there's always a story attached to the home, attached to the person that was there. That is heartbreaking. And I suppose you are also, well, if you are the cleanup team that goes in afterwards, I don't suppose you have that much interaction with the families.
We do actually, and they'll that is who will hire us. And we often learn without even asking a lot about the deceased or the family and the dynamics of it, and you just become part of the situation because you're there to help them move on. The families are dealing with funerals and trying to find wills and trust and credit cards and bank accounts and all that. The last thing that they should be worried about is, oh yeah, we have to go clean that up. Like, we can't be in the house. So I hope that we can give some semblance of a gift to these people by removing that visual and allowing them to just move on with their life and heal.
Mm-hmm. How do you deal with working so closely with death and loss and grief constantly?
What I've noticed is that, and this is probably the case for most people, but the less I know about the person, the easier it is for me, because then I can literally train my brain to view it as a mess. I'm just cleaning up a mess. I don't really want to know see their picture, know who they are. I don't want to put a face to it because then it becomes too personal. It's much easier with the less that I know and just looking at it as a mess.
And do you at your organization have any kind of sort of wellness or mental support for the mental health of your employees and your franchisees, or is that something that they have to take care of themselves?
We do. We have partnered up with BetterHelp. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's kind of an online therapy type site. We offer health insurance here that pays for mental health, but if they don't want to do that, we have, BetterHelp that the company pays for that they can talk to somebody.
That's awesome. Laura, what an inspiring and amazing story.
Well, thank you, Marlene.
Yeah. Not just one of resilience and overcoming and really transcending trauma, but really building it into a success for others. We have all different ways of giving back. And I love the way that you serve, in this world.
I just want to tell your listeners that, when you're trying to overcome trauma or a big event or, whatever is going on in your life, everything looks insurmountable. And I think the biggest takeaway that I have is bad stuff happens to everyone. It's how you take that event and turn it into a positive. And there's always a way to do that because, you could be experiencing the worst events in your life. And I look back at that and I'm like, that was a gift. It was a gift because it required me to pivot and do something differently that clearly wasn't working prior to that. So don't say, why me? Say, I'm glad it's me because it caused me to pivot and be where I'm supposed to be in the world.
That's incredibly powerful when you can look at your circumstances and say, it happened for me, as opposed to just to me.
It did. And just that tiny mindset change has changed my whole life. You can sit there and be sad about your past, or you can turn it into a positive, and it's part of who you are. And that's powerful.
Mm-hmm. What do you say to somebody that started a business, failed numerous times and saying, oh man, what advice have you got?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot, believe it or not, because in the way that I approach it is, business is difficult. It's supposed to be difficult. If it was easy, everyone would be in business and there would be no employees, right? So if you really want something to happen, you'll make it happen. If you don't, it won't happen. And that's how I kind of look at things. If you're trying to change something in your life, you have to desire that change and you have to focus on it, meditate on it, and make it your priority. There's always a way. I didn't have any money, but I found it. You can find it. If money's your thing, you can find it. If skills are your thing, go take a class. Find a mentor. There's always a way to make it happen. It's just business chooses the ones that are willing to fail forward.
That's awesome. Because, we have to fail in order to learn. Fantastic.
If you don't, I never trust anybody who hasn't failed. Because they probably won't offer you much in terms of success.
Yes. So, Laura, tell me, where can the listeners find you, or where can a new franchisee inquire and sign up with you?
Yeah, so we've got a new website out, crimescenecleaning.com, where you can see all of our videos. We're on YouTube at Crime Scene Cleaning as well, if you have kind of thick skin and you're interested in the work that we do. We're also on TikTok and Instagram under the same handle, Crime Scene Cleaning. So follow us along. And, if you're interested in franchising, it's right there on our website. Can tell you all about it and the available territories.
Awesome. Laura, thank you so much for joining me. This was illuminating. This really educated me so much. And like you say, I would never even thought about crime scene cleaning.
Exactly. See? Well, thank you for having me, Marlene. The pleasure was mine.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
That wraps up this podcast episode. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy my podcast, please take a minute to give me a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. Please subscribe in your favorite podcast directory so you don't miss an episode. Please consider following My Scented Life on Facebook and Instagram for daily inspiration. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. You can catch me again in the next episode. Same time, same place. Sending you lots of love and light. Bye.